I told some lady who was my next door neighbor in an elevator once, I said, in 40 years, I've never won an argument with a woman. And she said, that's not true. So, I mean, that's the lighter side of this. Then there's the serious side. And we need to be very cautious about these kind of things. Because what is it that we ourselves understand, first of all, before we're exporting that to others? So, some of Guru Maharaj would quote different maxims. Some of them come to mind, and I don't mean to be harsh or cruel, but just to sort of invoke his divine concepts first and then work from there. And one thing he said many times was, oil your own machine. Again, he didn't create that statement. He's quoting an aphorism. Oil your own machine means concentrate on yourself. Many times he liked to quote this German scholar who read Bhagavad Gita and came to the conclusion that the message of Bhagavad Gita is not to quarrel with the environment. Right? Like we hear things early on, just one sample of that would be the famous sloka, Matra sparsha stu konteya shitoshna sukadukada agama payano nityas tam titikshasva bharata, where Krishna is comparing karmic circumstances to environmental conditions, right? Seasonal changes, temperatures. And what I like to say is a footnote that even as devotees or those somewhat familiar with what's presented in Bhagavad Gita, we can think, oh, we've heard that, we know that. That's in the second chapter, we've heard that many times. But what I would remind even the devotees of is that if Krishna gives a particular example, we can assume it's a very good one. Right? It's not like he's saying, oh, I should have said, or why didn't I think of that? He who's, we hear in other places, Upadrastanu mantacha bharta bhokta maheshwara parmat meti chapyukto dehesmen pur. He's as the Paramatma in everyone. So I would think, if he's going to give an example, it must be a really good one. Right? He has an idea of what would be an example that most simple-hearted people could find tenable or acceptable. And I'm saying this indirectly that I guess I'm saying it's Krishna's job to do that. And he does his job very well. Although we can say he's passive in this context or non-interfering, but still conscience, inner suggestion, all of these things are there. We all know by our own practical experience in life, in living, everyone has an inner dialogue that's going on. Right? It's sort of, a dialogue with the self, a dialogue with ourselves, you could call it, all day. In fact, it would be more rare the moments when that dialogue is not obvious. But people are always, there's a voice, you're talking to yourself inside, making observations about life, circumstances, from many different perspectives, right? So, within that, the suggestion is also coming, what we can call conscience, from a plane, how to proceed, what's right, what's wrong. But referring back to that sloka, which ends on the expression, Tams titikshasva bharata, saying, what do you do in the world with seasonal changes, environmental conditions? You tolerate it. Right now we have the AC on because it's hot here. You make some adjustment, but basically saying you have to tolerate those conditions. So that's what's indicated there. Guru Maharaj is saying that scholar's summary interpretation, and again, it was an observation. His summary observation was, oh, the message is don't quarrel with the environment, right? But you can adjust yourself, right? And so that's back to oil your own machine. Right? The person next to us, they have their karmic circumstance, right? Their sojourn in the material world that's brought them to this particular point in time, place, and circumstance. We have to accept that for the most part. And if the Paramatma is non-interfering, the Paramatma, the super soul, right, the oversoul, is not meddling in the situation, because that would be to interfere with the jiva soul's minute independence. Right? There can be suggestion, but non-interference. What does the Upanishad say? Dva suparna sayuja sakaya, in one place. Like two birds on a tree. The tree is karmic activity. One bird is the individual soul. The other bird is the super soul, Paramatma, overseer, observer, who's observing jiva as she tastes the fruits of karmic activity. So, sometimes Srila Guru Maharaj would say, if you can embrace this, right, this concept, and it thematically resurfaces at different times in Bhagavad Gita, Bhoktaram yagya tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richtiti. It says, gyatva, knowing this, what's just been described, it says, if you know this, then shanti, om shanti, shanti, shanti. Right? You can get a little bit of peacefulness in the world if you understand that in the background, that person for whom we say, as the aphorism says, what? Not a blade of grass moves without the will of God. Right? It obviously moves without our consent. We're not the center of universal activities. Right? T.S. Eliot, and his poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, says one point, if I ask a particular question, he said, do I dare disturb the universe? When we're overwhelmed by our own perceived importance in the world, that what we do is of universal consequences. Right? We're not that personality for whom every blade of grass, moves with consent. So sometimes Srila Guru Maharaj would phrase this as saying that, remember, all things are not meant to satisfy you. Right? I mean, this seems so obvious and ironic, but ironically, it's sort of how we think in life. That all things, all people, all persons, all places, all events are meant to meet with my approval. It's, I could say the ultimate expression of egocentricity. And as a side point, sometimes Srila Guru Maharaj points out that like tapashis, or those who are performing austerities for spiritual realization, they give up everything. Right? I met someone once in Badrinath, on the way to Badrinath, that his name was Tyagi Baba. And the reason the name was Tyagi Baba is because he didn't have a name. You understand? So when you say like, where are you from? You say, we don't answer that question. Right? Because that would be identifying with some particular place. So they don't, you're supposed to forget that. You're not from anywhere. What's your name? Don't have a name. So that's why he was known as Tyagi Baba. And someone just covered in ashes, wearing kopins, smoking beedis, I said, why do you smoke the beedis? He said, to pass the time. But the point I wanted to make, Srila Guru Maharaj makes many times, he said, they can give up everything, right, except the notion that they are God. Right? That can't give up. Tattvamasi, I am that, I'm that Brahma, Soham, I'm so big, I'm infinite. Right? And they say, oh, in Krishna consciousness, always telling, das anu das gopnyam. Tad britya britya paricharaka britya britya, the servant of this, not even directly the servant. How humiliating. Right? The servant of the servant of the servant. Oh, this is so pathetic. We got over this type of slavery in the Middle Ages, right? And ushered in a new humanistic way of viewing the world, where man is the center of all things and the measure of all things. And a few hundred years later, women are like raising their hand. What about us? Like, all right, we'll let you in the club too, if you complain enough. So that human beings are the center of all existence. He said that they can't give up, this egocentric position in favor of the theocentric position. And that brings us to the point. So we say, Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. Was all this tapasya meant for? Sarva Loka Maheshwara, the one who already owns and controlling everything. Also, as a side point, Brahma, who understood that Vishnu is sometimes described as yagya, bhuk. He eats the offerings of sacrifice. After the yagya, then, right? But when he saw Krishna sitting with the cowherd boys, he's got food in his left hand, he's, like flute stuffed in his belt. This is yagya bhuk, right? With a lunchbox from his mother, surrounded by all his friends on a riverbank. And that takes it to another level. But so what is being said here, who everything is meant for their enjoyment, they own and control everything. Suhridam sarvabhutanam. They're friendly. They're not only friendly to you, the best friend. They're more friendly to you than you are to your own self. And there's the rub. Krishna and Carson, those who are Krishna's devotees, they're more friendly to us than we are to our own selves. They have our own self-interest at heart more than we do. And people will say, well, that's a very patronizing thing to say. Well, it may appear that way, but if you approach it from this point of view, when you're dealing with self-expression, if yourself is buried under layers of acquired prejudice, then what is all this so-called self-expression about? What self is being expressed? The self that is the result of provincial, national identity, sexual politics, gender politics, financial thing, all of this, right? That self is going to be expressed through all these layers of acquired prejudice, and not just from one lifetime, but even for the people who accept, oh no, there's no other, this is it. So all of this acquired prejudice, right? Western civilization. You go to a school where they teach you Western civilization. So I asked the question, when I was at, like 10, 12 years old, saw this book, Western civilization. Just naively, I said, is there a book on Eastern civilization? And they're like, oh, no. Civilization is Western. There's no book on Eastern civilization, because civilization, we only became civilized in the West, right? Like Greece is a very good example. Greece is supposed to be like the birth of democracy, and I mean, Greece is about ready to like fall into whatever the ocean is there. I didn't study geography. The Mediterranean Sea. I know someone will write in, no, it's not actually, I joke with that girl, Madhu Priya. I always say, because she's Greek, she's our one Greek devotee, I think. Her ancestors fought in the Peloponnesian War. Now I know that's not going to get a big laugh, because, but that's what they make you study in history, right? Western civilization, the Peloponnesian War, right? We're sitting here going like, what the hell is that, right? But it was like a big deal at a particular time. So my history teacher, a lady of errors, not errors, but errors, she has to say, the sum total of Western history can be summed up in one word: booty. And by that, in modern context, we better define it, means that one group of people enters a country and then they kill most of the people there and then take their women and the jewels and the property and everything, and then they own it for some time. Then another group comes 100 years later, 200 years later, does the same thing. That's Western civilization, right? So all of this emphasis that, that through social networking will lead to such a, is a great apparatus for self-expression. Theoretically, but if your self is buried under layers and layers of acquired prejudice, it's doubtful. So, here, inadvertently, indirectly, we're being told, don't waste your time being outer directed. The Hittite Empire, the Peloponnesian War, they all come and go. There'll always be one or two within recent memory. Don't take your stand there in that plane, where wars are coming and going, where the universe is coming and going. So, Guru Maharaj will say, Bhagavatam takes it to another level. Whereas in Bhagavad Gita, you're being told, don't quarrel with the environment, be tolerant. The Srimad Bhagavatam is saying, Tattenu kampam susamikshmano bunjana evatma kritam vipakam. That susamiksha, if you scrutinize this, if you look deeply beneath the surface of karmic circumstance, and as we said, acquired prejudice and tendencies, samskar, impressions, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, acquired mental impressions, layering, covering the self. If you look very deep in your circumstances, you'll see not only is toleration a prescribed, good prescription, but In the background, Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, the friendly hand of Krishna is there. Who owns and controls everything, is not trying to crush you, but is your friend, right? And wanting to bring you out of karmic circumstance. So what I mean to say here, really, to address the initial question, is that that's between God and that individual. We're not to impose our conceptions upon others. If somebody sincerely inquires, you try to answer as the best you can. But to try and change somebody against their will, to try and impose or enforce some way of seeing on someone that is against, without their consent, that they're resistant to, that won't be successful, and it also begs the position of the person who's the enforcer. So, but in the case of, you could say devotees, or say a devotee wife, she's concerned about her husband, then the best thing is, like we do for any new person, is just give them exposure to Krishna consciousness. Same things parents do with their children. You give them exposure to Krishna consciousness. How far they will embrace that is an individual thing. As we mentioned again in the Gita, Manushanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhai yatatamapi siddhanam kaschan mam veti tattvataha. Krishna himself is saying in the Gita, again, and he should know, he's situated in everyone's heart. He can do his own demographic study, statistical analysis at any given point in time. He's saying it's very rare for someone to seriously express interest in spiritual culture, theistic culture, substantially. That's rare. Out of thousands, one. And then what does he say? And out of those who may become siddha, in the general sense of the term, perfect, spiritually realized, he says, Kastyan mam vita tattvataha. Hardly one knows me. Elsewhere, in the Bhagavatam we hear, what is it? Muktanam api siddhanam, narayana parayana, kotishvapi mahamune. Out of 10 million liberated souls, one might be a devotee of Krishna. And once Guru Maharaj said, even that is too many. So what do we hear? Koti karmanishta madhye ek gyani shrestha. Out of 10 million one gyani is better than 10 million karmis. And then koti mukti durlabh madhye ek Krishna bhakta. And out of millions of liberated souls, one may be a devotee of Krishna. So it's rare, and generally the outcome of accumulated sukriti, from agyata sukriti to gyata sukriti, shraddha, sadhu sangha. So Guru Maharaj is telling us underground, agyata sukriti, which we define as some unknowing contact with nirguna agents. Right? So, if someone's of a couple, if one person is engaged in the culture of Krishna consciousness, then by dint of connection with them, the other person's going to get a certain amount of exposure. And if they remain together, is in a mutually respectful relationship with one another, that person will accumulate sukriti, and in time it will, the cumulative effect of that sukriti will be expressed as shraddha, faith, which will lead them to take the association of devotees seriously. But as Gurudev would say in a phrase, you want to make it very simple? Not to force. Not to force with children, not to force with life partners. And while we're on the subject, also not to think that what you do, Rupa Goswami mentions this in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. You have to be Krishna conscious. You can't be Krishna conscious for someone else, and someone else can't be designated to be Krishna conscious for you. Right? So you can't think, well, I'm not, what did I hear? At Bhaktivedanta Manor in England, this big temple that George Harrison donated to the devotees, and Prabhupada, they installed the deities there. So they have 50,000 people go to the temple sometimes. So in the little town, first everyone thought, oh, they're going to be very unhappy with the devotees. But like the local pub owner, he was very happy. And we were going, why would the pub, we say no illicit, no intoxication. Why would the pub owner be happy? Because what he found was these Indian men were dropping their wives off at the temple, and then they would all go to the pub and sit there and drink Guinness, or whatever they drink. So the pub owner is like, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. But you say, well, why am I mentioning this other than for comedic effect? Is that their idea was like, oh, my wife, she's the religious one. So they think, I'm at the pub drinking Guinness and my wife's bowing down before the deity and doing some seva. I'm doing pretty good. Or my child will be Krishna conscious. Right? Or the husband, the wife, the husband, the parents, the children, the parents, etc. So there's a nice sloka, which I haven't committed to memory, but Guru Maharaj mentions from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where Rupa Goswami mentions all of these. It's not that you can just buy it either. You can't have a surrogate where someone's going to be accumulating Krishna consciousness for you and then transfer it to you. Neither can you purchase it like they used to have long ago. It's good to engage your wealth, your money, your wife, your family. That's good. But still, it's about Atma Samarpanam, offering yourself. So if we rephrase the original question and say, how can I get someone to engage in Atma Samarpanam, self-giving? Well, usually the best way is to show by example, to offer yourself in service and be the personification of a desirable outcome. And then they'll see, oh, I see Krishna consciousness as having a good effect upon this person. It may awaken some interest in them. But to try and cajole, or what's another word, to make someone feel guilt or whatever, and try and intimidate them into taking up the culture of Krishna consciousness, not, and as I said in Gurudev's words, not to force.